Hey there, welcome to episode 10 of The Pod Couple.
Salute!
I felt like you were going to say cheers, but you didn't. You mixed it up.
I'm worldly. I'm more worldly than you thought. I'm a little more cosmopolitan. Have you seen that show, Salute Your Shorts, on Nickelodeon?
I haven't caught that one yet, but is that going to be... Do you want to cover that next week on the podcast?
Perhaps.
Okay. Well...
before we do that,
we should probably remind people that if they like this podcast, they can subscribe on iTunes, on Stitcher, on Blueberry, on Google Play, on YouTube. So many options, so many ways to subscribe and enjoy this podcast, or at least tolerate it.
all of them free.
All of them free, yeah. This is just from the goodness of our own generous hearts going out to you.
And no one will pay us anything to do it also.
And we have not been turned down by multiple sponsors. But yeah, so, we like to start with quick hits, little things throughout the week that maybe caught our eye. Did anything catch your eye this week, Mr. Hubbs?
Yeah, there were a few things, but by the way, I'm Steve Hubbs. This is Kyle Gherkin. So that's all you need to know if you're a first-time listener. A few things that caught my eye, but I can't really remember any of them. I do have a question for you.
Okay, well, that was really helpful.
Thanks. It's just this kind of chemistry that keeps the show popping. What do you think is the most overrated television show?
Of all time?
Yeah, sure.
Besides Salute?
Salute your shorts, sir.
Okay. Yeah. So, of all time, do you have one queued up? Do you have one in the quiver?
Yeah, well, I think that for me, if you know my kind of humor and my style, like I feel like I'm a fairly generous audience member, and I watch a lot of comedies, and I like a lot of comedies. And when I say overrated, I don't mean bad in this instance, but the two that really jump out at me are Seinfeld and South Park, which are like legendary comedies that people love and adore. And for me, it's just they both break the first rule of comedy, which is be funny. I don't ever really laugh that much. It's not like they're horrible, and I think they're total garbage, but I would never sit down to watch an episode of Seinfeld when I could sit down and watch an episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm. So.
Yeah, but Curb is like evolutionary Seinfeld, so I don't think that that's entirely fair. I feel like people talk about Seinfeld more than they talk about Curb. Well, it was certainly more widely watched. I mean, because it was on NBC, and at a time when television, there were just far fewer shows, and so that was still a point in time where people would actually, sit down at an appointed time and watch something, and like have to plan their night around watching.
What horrible days those were! Yeah. Aren't you so glad we've moved past that?
Yeah, it's hard to imagine going back. I think when we tell our kids about those sorts of things, they think of it as some sort of like pioneering frontiersman. Just it'd be like hearing stories from the Oregon Trail of people dying of diphtheria or something.
Yeah.
So
remember when we had to get water from the well on the family farm? Oh yeah, remember when we didn't have a DVR? How about that?
Yeah, those definitely were dark times. The most overrated show, nothing's jumping to mind for me. So maybe I'll circle back to that. What I want to ask you about is I have, like sometimes these little statistics, things jump out and catch your eye. One did this week for me, and I'm curious what do you think, or what's your guess as far as the number...
These quick hits always turn into some kind of quiz. It's always like pop quiz for Steve. Go ahead.
Yes. So, what do you think is the... What do you think I'm going to say?
Well, I hope it's Salute.
Clearly, I don't know. No, on a per capita basis, like, how do you think the U.S. ranks versus the world average in terms of number of prison guards? So in other words, like there's obviously an average number of prison guards worldwide, and the U.S. either has more or fewer than that average. By what percentage? 10%, 20%, whatever.
Well, considering we have more prisoners, it would stand to reason, I would think, that we'd have more prison guards, and
Solid
because
reasoning.
there's privatized prisons, and they have their own unions and their own like lobbyists, I would say we probably have more prison guards by say 30%.
150%.
150. Holy Christmas morning. That is a lot.
154. So yeah, and that was somewhat predictable for the reasons you said. But now here's my next question for you: how many police officers per capita do you think we have relative to?
Well, it's sort of set up for me to think that probably less per capita. So minus, let's go big, 50%.
Not too bad, 34.
Okay.
So yeah, which when you think about it, really strikes a strange incentive, right? It's like, well, if you do something bad, you're not very likely to be caught, but if you are, we'll put you away for a long, long time.
Yeah.
Which is like the worst possible way to incentivize people, because I think there's been numerous studies which have demonstrated that people are far more likely to alter their behavior based on short-term things like, say, getting caught than long-term concerns like spending 25 years in prison if they happen to get caught and go through trial and get convicted and all these things that are far down the road. So it's sort of a perverse incentive in our current system, and it seems as if that money would be much better allocated to putting more police on the streets, and then presumably the crime level would drop, which would require less prisons, less prison guards, etc.
Yeah, that all makes a little too much sense, Kyle. There's got to be a fly in that ointment somewhere.
So
we're just not seeing, because I frankly refuse to believe that we're doing anything wrong. America, greatest country in the world.
Yeah, I don't think that's very likely. You're right. I must have made some kind of miscalculation there.
There you go.
Probably.
See the preview for that Snowden movie? Oliver Stone?
I didn't see the preview. I did see that such a thing was happening, though. I saw.
Yeah. Looks like they gave it the old Hollywood treatment, pretty hardcore when you check out the preview. Because it's difficult, I think, to make any sort of hacking related thing, cinematic, because it's sort of a boring thing. So they have to guss it all up, and just like words flying through space, and it's like super Minority Report touchscreen computers or whatever. I don't know. But I will say that Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who's been cast as Snowden, looks like he's done a bang-on job with that Snowden impersonation. Looks pretty solid.
Yeah, it would be really hard to make a realistic Snowden movie. I mean, Citizen 4 was garbage. Oh, wait a minute. No, it was actually really good.
Yeah, I was like, why did they make 4 of those? You just need one. It's just Hollywood and all its sequels.
Yeah, I was hoping they would call it Citizen Kyle, personally, but they decided to go another route there. So all right. Well, now that we've sorted out the proper number of prison guards relative to police officers in the country, I think we can probably move on to TV.
Okay, let's do it.
So before we move on to Game of Thrones...
You're going to say, before we move on to TV, like, it's perfect.
Perfect
segue.
We're ready to move on to TV. But before we do that, let's talk about a little bit about Girls, maybe a very little bit, depending how much we have to say. There's 2 more episodes that happened since the last time we spoke of it. They're
including the finale, yeah.
The final 2 episodes of the season. They actually burned them off in the same week, I guess, just to clear the decks for Game of Thrones and Veep and Silicon Valley, which are all coming back. It's really kind of an embarrassment of riches right now, and almost annoyingly so. It's like, why can't you save Veep and Silicon Valley for later? I don't want to have to they bring out these shows on the same night.
Yeah,
as
you
Game
just
of
say
Thrones.
goodbye to your Sunday nights, basically.
Right, exactly. So. But nevertheless, that's what they're doing. So obviously we have the big Game of Thrones premiere to talk about. We talked about it last week, the previous seasons, and of course what we had, some expectations we had. So we'll get into that in a minute. But first, any parting thoughts on the final 2 episodes of Girls?
Well, it's been an interesting relationship with Girls this season, because I started out sort of lukewarm on it, and we had addressed that, and then I grew and I found some episodes that really resonated with me. And then it did end up, I feel like the finale kind of went back or almost went full circle, and I ended up a little lukewarm on that as well. It seems like the thing that I don't like about the show primarily is the character of Hannah sort of constantly seems to be getting a pat on the back for being like a ridiculous human being, and it seems like everything kind of got sewn up, and it's in the last episode specifically, she sort of gets to live out this dream of doing the speaking thing. I forget what it's called, but it's a real thing.
The moth.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
I've seen some.
We've all seen on This American Life.
Is that what it is?
I mean, they've had stuff in This American Life, or on that show. They've had like recorded speeches from the moth.
Oh. Well, I just looked it up on my own accord.
You just absorbed it from.
From the ether.
Yeah.
From the ether. But the thing with Hannah is that, it's sort of that's the way they wrapped up the season, and she's, jogging at the end, and it's sort of, I suppose, supposed to indicate some next chapter in her life and this idea of her fixing herself. But is she really? Or is she just sort of... It seems like, to me, an abrupt turnaround. She's like suddenly she's not a ridiculous person because she left a fruit basket on their door with, like, a nice note. And it's just not a hard enough sell for me to be sold on Hannah's character overall.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I didn't take it that it was supposed to be some incredible turnaround. I just took it as she's taking a couple of steps in the right direction, and there's still plenty of room to stumble, and that it will be a hard journey because, as it is for anyone who has to mature from a place of great immaturity, like where she's at or she has been for the past several seasons. But I, especially given that next season is going to be their last, it makes sense to start that journey, I think, at the end of this season. So I didn't mind it. I mean, yeah, if she suddenly just this, she's left everything behind and she's this perfect person going forward in all of season 6 without any struggles, then it will be problematic. But I was okay with the way it ended. One thing I did like about that episode, and in particular the moth storyline, was they'd kind of set it up where they were talking about there was a scoring system and you could win, and they even sort of make you think it's going to be that kind of story, the underdog winning, because as she starts to go up, they say, oh, you can't bring this paper up, and if you do, you'll be scored down, and so they take it away from her and she goes up without it. But then, like, they completely eschew it, and they don't even, not only do they not show her getting scored or whatever, but they don't show her winning, but they don't even show her getting scored, because it's not about that at all. Like, it's about her personal journey and the things that she had to say and the revelations she's had about herself. And so I like that, because that would have been such an easy thing to fall into, is at least showing, some judge holding up a 10 or some cheesy shot like that. And they didn't fall into that trap. So that was nice.
Yeah, that's definitely something atypical of. That would have been weird, I think, if they had shown it. But I see what you're saying. You could have anticipated that. The final episode was also the episode with the fight between Adam and Starly. What's her name? Jessa. Yeah. So that was a great scene. Them just going absolutely fun. Crazy, and him, destroying the apartment, and then the cut back to just like all of the how they've laid waste to the entire environment. That was definitely good.
Yeah, that was definitely a good scene. I thought that episode 9 was actually stronger than episode 10. There were a couple things I liked in that episode. One of them was one of the great all-time Ray lines. When Shoshana was asking him what happened to his coffee truck, he said, well, I can't get into it, but it involved Hannah trying to suckle the head of my penis at 50 miles per hour.
Yeah. That's one of the great all-time Ray moments, too, that whole exchange. And I think we talked about that before, but it's a great piece of comedy. And maybe that's why the finale in my mind sort of seemed lackluster, because there had just been some really strong episodes leading up to it. And I didn't feel like it was bad. I didn't dislike it. really, it just wasn't the strongest episode of the season for me.
I think Girls often has that problem, though. I feel like the final episode never really feels like the culmination of things in the way that other shows are able to do. It's partly like because the way the show is built. It's sort of these people wandering and struggling through their lives, and so you don't have these clean resolutions. True. In the way that some other shows are
sometimes
able to do.
they're just left incredibly open-ended, like the sort of Shoshana's storyline.
Right.
You're just left dangling. I could have used a little more of her and probably a little less of Hannah.
Yeah, I was very glad to see Elijah get a much more meaty role this season than he has had. I mean, he started out as a fairly minor character in those early seasons. He was just kind of
that's the Book of Mormon guy, right? Elijah.
He's in the Book of Mormon. You're saying the actual
he's from Broadway, right?
I don't know. I mean, he very well may
the
be.
Gay guy.
I don't know him from that, but he's Hannah's ex-boyfriend who turned out to be gay.
Elijah, got it.
And anyway, and had that storyline with Corey Stoll as Deal Hartley or whatever his name was.
Anderson Cooper. We all know who he was supposed to be.
Yeah, no one was fooled by that bald head. But that was, that was a good story, and I thought it was just nice to see him getting to do his own thing outside of the Hannah orbit, basically. And so, otherwise, the only thing that I thought was really noteworthy in that episode, well, besides the anti-hipster coffee shop, which I thought was just a great idea.
Yeah. No one's better to run that than Colin Quinn.
Yeah, exactly.
It's perfect casting.
I would definitely visit that coffee shop. I like when he basically kicks the person out, and she's like, no, we can't discriminate. We just have to bully them and judge them until they leave of their own accord. And also, but the other part that I was going to mention is Lena Dunham. She has that conversation with, and I'm blanking on the actress's name, but she's in Parks and Rec and some other things. But she plays the other writer from Hannah's college or whatever, and they hadn't seen each other in years. And
it was Jenny Slate, right?
Yeah, Jenny Slate. That's the name. Anyway. Yeah, and she's been in lots of stuff, obviously, lots of comedy shows. She's always a welcome presence. But they have this pretty interesting conversation that, to me, a lot of it felt like Lena Dunham was talking about herself through using Jenny Slate as the mouthpiece for sort of her darkest self, which I
definitely
cool.
got that as well. And then it sort of it was almost perfect, because then they have that moment where they're like, should we make out? And you could see that sort of masturbatory overindulgence in oneself coming to life with these characters actually almost flirting with the idea of because if I had a clone, there's probably a good chance I would do some weird sex stuff to it.
Yeah, I mean, why not?
Right.
I mean, who's gonna tell?
Not that clone. I'm taking a link the piano wire to him as soon as it's done.
Who's going to tell except you, who is telling any person who listens to this podcast? Oh, I guess we're back.
We're fine.
Who's going to tell?
Yeah.
Who's going to know? So yeah. All right. Well, anyway, that's kind of the last I had on Girls. Again, nice comeback season for Girls.
Overall, very solid.
And
some really funny moments.
And I am looking forward. I think they did a good job of setting up a final season. I can see some of these storylines now are set up in a place where these people can find their way to at least some sort of satisfying next step in their journey in their lives. I mean, it's not going to be, again, the type of show where it closes itself off neatly like Breaking Bad or something with as the camera flies away from Hannah's dead body. I mean, who knows? Yeah. Maybe they'll go in a weird direction.
Well, but if they got my letters, then that's exactly what they'll do.
But it does feel like they're in a good place to finish it off now. So, speaking of finishing things off, Game of Thrones also trying to set things up for the final run here.
They finished off the books.
Yeah, they finished off the books, and now they have to finish off the show.
And they finished off. So this episode, the your initial thoughts on the season premiere.
Yeah, well, I think, when you talk about the season premiere, and of course, spoilers abound,
Yeah.
as you should know, but I think that there's certainly one burning question that comes to mind after having seen it, and that is, like, if, now that you know Melisandre's true form, like, would you still fuck her as long as she was
hell
wearing...
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You said that so fast, I'm not sure you even care about whether she's wearing the necklace or not.
But, hey.
I've seen her with the necklace, so...
Yeah, just hold on to that.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I also agree. I feel like the necklace is just a very high-end version of turning out the lights, right? It's like,
Exactly.
So
I feel like the old haggish one would let you do some funkier stuff.
yeah, she's been around she's really been around for so long. She's probably just wants something new kind of experience, right? So she's like, yeah, try anything.
Yeah, probably used to like all of those great masculine, rugged lovers, and it's like she wants something new. Check out this male waif.
Just step right this direction. Yeah. So, but do you have king's blood running through your veins, sir?
Probably. I was like, is that a kind of malt liquor? King's malt liquor. That's coursing through these veins.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, that was my first question for you. Do you have, what are your thoughts on the premiere?
Well, I mean, it's sort of in the way that girls' finales tend not to sew things up too tightly. Game of Thrones premieres tend to do a lot of table setting, and that's all you can really hope for. And I think they did a fairly strong job with most of the stories. It was interesting to me to see how short this episode was for a premiere. It seems like we sort of lost out on maybe another 20 minutes or something of storytelling we could have had, because it was only 43 minutes. Which I think is the shortest premiere that they've had.
That's definitely short for a Game of Thrones episode. And it's surprising that they didn't involve Bran, to me, given that he'd been off for an entire season.
Right.
That they still making his way.
Yeah, I had said that's the storyline I was kind of looking forward to the most, because we had taken such a big break from him. And
couldn't you squeezed in 5 minutes of Bran?
It's like they've just decided no one's excited about Bran coming back except for me. So a lot of table settings, and in one case, in the case of Dorne, just like a table being flipped over. You could tell, it really felt to me like they were like, we don't really like this storyline, so let's just murder these people and get the hell out of here.
Right. I know poor Alexander Siddig, just all the Deep Space Nine fanboys were quite upset.
Myself included, yeah.
It really feels like a waste of an actor. It's like, couldn't you have gotten anyone? Like, how much did they pay him to do that role? I don't know. Not that Game of Thrones worries a lot about money, but still, seems like definitely a waste of his talents. But I do think, I wonder even if that was originally the plan, or if they had bigger plans for him, and then they just felt like the storyline was not going anywhere. Certainly it was widely panned last year, and so they're like, all right, fuck it, we're going to call an audible here.
Yeah, that's what it felt like to me, for sure.
Yeah.
They spent so much time in Dorne in the last season, or like enough time.
Right. It just felt like so much time.
Right,
I don't know how much it really was. Doesn't it?
So on one hand, that's good, because,
right,
like maybe they can just get out of there and focus on people that you want to see. But on the other hand, it felt a little sloppy.
Does it also feel like the sand snakes are not nearly as cool as they should be?
Yeah,
absolutely. Like for some
man.
reason, they just are not landing the sand snakes, and I don't know what it is that they need to do differently exactly. I don't know, put my finger on it, but it feels like one of those things that should have been like right in the show's wheelhouse to nail.
Yeah.
And they're not.
Well, they seem more like bitchy teenage girls you'd find at a mall than they do like vile temptresses.
Yeah, maybe that's what the problem. Something too modern about them, maybe.
A little bit.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of too modern, did the Dothraki frat boy scene bother you at all in that regard, or did you enjoy it as comic relief?
I actually did enjoy it as comic relief. Yeah, I thought it was a nice kind of a callback to season one. It's good to see the Khaleesi back in that element kind of again. Um, what were your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I did. I enjoyed it for the comic relief as well.
It did seem like almost they were like setting up, like you could imagine like a funny side Game of Thrones sitcom with like the frustrated Cal and like his goofy lackeys, like
Yeah.
that whole bit with listing the greatest pleasures in the world was
Right.
really funny.
Yeah, it was well done, and hard to make comedy work with subtitles too.
Yeah.
So nice job on that. One thing that did bother me about the scene was that I felt like Call Morrow was not nearly skeptical enough. Because Khaleesi says, or Danny says, oh, I'm, the Daenerys Stormborn, the fifth of her name, whatever. All it gives her whole long speech, and then he basically just throws her right in the garbage and is like, yeah, you're a nobody, you're
Yeah.
nothing, so on and so forth. Like he didn't believe her at all. And then she says, like, I was Khal Drogo's wife, and he's like, oh
Yeah,
well,
that's
then
good.
and it was like she didn't pull out an artifact or
Right.
something that was like, oh, this is Khal Drogo's ring or something. She didn't like give him some piece of information that only Khal Drogo could have known or something. So like, why did he suddenly
That
change?
guy would make a horrible bouncer.
Yeah,
Just some 12-year-old. I'm 21. You're in.
yeah. Or it's like, yeah, I'm 21. No, you're not. I'm 30. All right.
Okay.
Well, then,
Oh, you should. Oh, I'm sorry. My mistake.
so it's anyway. I don't know. I'm sure it was just a matter of narrative expediency and them not wanting to drag that out. But it did ring false for me. I was like, what? Like, what, really? Like,
Yeah.
why did he change his mind all of a sudden? And decide she's something
Right. There's no
special?
like line where it's like someone I've heard of her, the white-haired.
Right.
It would have been so easy to put something like that in.
Exactly. So you need to be a more ambitious interlocutor, Call Morrow. But yeah, otherwise, that was a fun scene. So another question I had, if we talk about sort of the tying back to the Dany storyline, of course, Tyrion has taken over her role as temporary ruler of Meereen anyway, and they have the scene where he's wandering through the streets with Varys, and they have these shots when they're sort of in that open square where the camera's behind like some dilapidated
Ne'er-do-well.
wooden slats, and it's kind of peering through, but they never show anyone. Do you think that this was just an artistic choice and just the idea that people in general have their eyes on them, or do you think that there's a specific person?
I think that there's a specific person
Okay.
as yet to be revealed.
Okay. Yeah, I was curious because that's
I actually thought, like, in that scene, it did sort of a good job to ratchet up the tension because I thought that they would be attacked. That sort of
Right.
seemed to be what it was indicating.
yeah.
Like that we're going to jump out at any moment. I expected, like, an arrow to go through Varys' neck or something, but thankfully they both live to put together another burnt fleet. That was a nice nod to the audience's frustrations when she's not going anytime soon.
Yeah. At least not on ships. I did think that I did think it was overly ballsy by them. Like, would they really? I mean, they're both pretty smart dudes. Like, would they really just go wandering the streets of Marine, without any guards or like unsullied with them or anything? Didn't totally
Yeah.
buy that either. But
Right. No,
but
I'm with you. It seems kind of weird that Tyrion actually has any sort of power because he's basically brand new to the situation and now she's gone. Like, why are people even listening to him?
yeah, I mean, if she said, look, this guy's ruling in my stead, and the people loyal to her and the Unsullied and everything back him, then I can see him still having a measure of power, but not enough to be walking the streets alone, especially given the Sons of the Harpy and everything being out there. If he's her handpicked a ruler in her stead, then it seems like that would be a big target on his back. So I don't know. Didn't seemed more bravery than sense in that particular scene.
Yeah, hopefully they tighten things up as the season progresses because there are a few moments like that where it does. There were some jarring moments, like with Brienne finding Sansa in the nick of time and before they form the supergroup. Super happy to see those four together. Super happy to see, Reek become a little more like Theon again. Those moments are great, but it's just like the timing of she just happens to be riding up like right before, Sansa's torn apart by dogs. Who then, I can't recall like what happens to the dogs. The dogs were just like, they just like disappeared.
That's good. I never even thought about that until just now. That's a point. Yeah, they didn't show them like chopping the dogs in half.
Yeah, and apparently, according to Reek / Theon, like that was the whole reason of running away from the dogs. It's like worse than death, better to die in the
right.
river. But apparently those dogs kind of pussies.
Yeah.
Someone shows up on a horse and they're like, we don't know that horse.
Maybe they're like, it's a woman?
Yeah.
And then they ran away. Yeah.
Misogynist mutts.
They can't deal with a woman. I think, yeah, I mean, that scene, that was actually, I felt like one of the better scenes in the first episode. Obviously, maybe so much of it was just I was ready for Sansa to have some good luck.
Yeah,
so
sure.
I was forgiving, maybe that it was a bit too serendipitous, but that she flies in at the last second and saves the day. But it was like, yeah, they've beaten us down so badly with putting Sansa through the ringer that I think I was just happy to have anything good go our way.
Oh, for sure.
And especially because of the way they even set it up with that another swerve where it's like, when you think she's getting away, and then it's like, oh, the dogs find him, and even you think, okay, well, Theon's gonna draw him away. Nope, they immediately find her, and it's like, oh, god damn it,
Yeah.
like what's gonna happen now? And then, so yeah, for that to happen, and then there's a very nice moment after the battle, where Sansa or where Brienne pledges her loyalty to Sansa, and Sansa accepts her into her service.
Yeah, that's definitely like the MVP moment of,
right.
of the first episode for me. That was great.
Yeah,
and Podrick helping with the line,
right.
the line finish. Oh, that's beautiful, man.
And even Theon having a role, giving her the nod. She looks to him for some sort of advisement. So it was a nice scene for everyone.
Yeah, with those four rolling together, we'll probably never need to see Bran again.
Yeah,
it's cool. We got the fellowship.
We got Brienne. It sounds a lot like Bran. So and Brienne, we didn't even talk about her last week when we were comparing it with the book some, but that's a character who I think far and away is probably had the biggest jump from the books to the TV show in terms of quality. Like I hate the Brienne storyline in the books. It's so boring every time they go to it. I just want it to be over. And of course they've changed a tremendous amount the storyline, but even just her character just holds no interest for me. Her chapters are just something I'm getting through in the books, but I think she's great. I mean, and it's a lot of that has to do with the performance of Gwendolyn Christie, who's excellent in the role. But
yeah, you really can't imagine anybody else playing that part, man. So good. She's like Sigourney Weaver from Aliens level of like badass,
This episode, if you really look at the big picture, I think that it was a lot about loyalty. Like pretty much throughout every storyline, you could probably tie into loyalty in some way. Even with the Night's Watch, it's who are the men who are loyal to Jon? Where does the loyalty of the Wildlings lie? And even somebody like I'm blanking on his name now. The guy
Dolorous Ed.
No,
Davos?
Not Ed. The guy who was behind killing Jon. Ultimately.
Oh, Alistair?
Yeah, Alistair. Yeah. So even Sir Alistair, who like you arguably was incredibly disloyal, and even admitted he was disloyal to his Lord Commander.
I really liked that part.
But yet he said it was in service to a higher loyalty, which is of course loyalty to the Night's Watch. So I thought it was very interesting the way they continued to play with loyalty, and everybody. Almost for every single character, it was where does your loyalty lie? Where does it truly lie? All
well, I say fuck loyalty, fuck fate, fuck everyone that's not the pod couple.
That's right. Very nicely done. Yeah, that was a good scene. Another excellent performance from Lena Headey, both in that scene where she has some self-aware moments, but even better, what I really enjoyed was when she comes down to the docks to see.
Yeah, that was great.
To see basically her daughter coming home, is at least what she thinks, and then just seeing Jamie, and it's all, just her
Yeah,
face is still, but you see everything happen and all the
all the life
realization.
drain out of her. Right.
Exactly, which is, I mean, not an easy thing to do as an actor, to be so small and yet convey so much emotion in a moment like that. So I was very impressed with that. Um, any other Game of Thrones thoughts from this episode?
Let's see here. No, I think we touched on every single thing. Probably just take the rest of the season off.
Yeah,
I kind of got what I wanted. John's still dead.
yeah.
So,
If John's not coming
yeah.
back in this episode, I'm out.
Do you suspect that they will, now having seen the first episode, do you think the next one that we're going to get Jon Snow resurrected, or do you think that they're really gonna drag it out?
I could see it going to episode 3. Like, I could actually see them not even going back to the Wall storyline
In episode 2?
in episode 2.
Maybe that's where, maybe we'll get a really brand heavy episode.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll see something from the
There was someone
all
else.
the Theon's family, right? Because we don't really
Yeah.
see anything from
Right.
them.
Well, yeah, and they hired what's his name from Deadwood to do Ian McShane.
Yeah.
To play one of those characters. One of the
Oh, did they?
yeah. So you didn't hear
Great
about
Joy.
that?
No, I didn't know.
Yeah, that bit of casting news.
That's great.
Yeah, somebody was.
I hope he just says cocksucker like 4,000 times.
I think that's the whole reason they brought him in. Yeah, no, it was funny because somebody actually asked him about, oh, is it really stressful to like not have to give away spoilers and all this? Some reporter was asking him about it, and he was like, I don't worry about that. Like, I don't know, people get too hung up on that shit. It's just tits and dragons.
Brilliant.
So, a pretty good summation.
Yeah.
Come for the tits, stay for the dragons.
Song of Tits and Dragons.
That really has a nice ring to it. I think Martin should consider revising the title.
It's not too late.
It's really not.
As long as you change it before it's all over.
There are at least 2 more books or 25 more years to go. So, yeah. So they're, like you said, the Greyjoys, they're going to definitely circle back to them this season. We didn't see any of that. We didn't see any of Bran. I think there was even another storyline we didn't see anything of. So
maybe George R.R. Martin's like a reverse Melisandre, and like he gets like all old and fat whenever he wears that little sailor hat of his, but then at night he like takes it off and he's just like, some 19-year-old spry kid, and that's why he's not worried about finishing this shit at all. He's got years.
Yeah. When did he start?
99?
No, I'm saying when did he start if he's only 19? Was he riding in the womb or
Yeah, no, it's just sort of the thing that came to him once he initially when he was like real young, he started praying to the Lord of Light, and it's worked out pretty well so far.
Yeah. So one other thing I actually thought of when I was watching this episode, there's that nice moment between Roose and Ramsay where Roose really cuts him down to size, and I thought how he really is the poor man's Tywin. Roose is in this episode. I mean, it's like I miss Tywin, but Roose is a pretty good substitute.
Yeah.
And really, you talk about the understanding how to manipulate people. Certainly, understanding how to manipulate your own children, which is a skill all of us should learn.
Mm-hmm.
But
I've been practicing on other people's kids for
that's good.
years.
You want to practice on other people's kids first.
You know what they like? Lollipops. Lollipops and Snapchat.
Lured into the back of your vehicle with lollipops. We all know you don't have a vehicle. It's okay.
Exactly.
It's clearly a joke.
My vehicle.
I mean, yeah, you would, but no vehicle, unfortunately. But no, as far as you have to respect a guy who, when Walder Frey offered up a wife and said he would match that wife's weight in gold, immediately picked the fattest of the daughters.
Yeah, brilliant.
It's like, that's a baller move, So
yeah, he definitely takes the place of Tywin as that. He's up there with a Littlefinger or a Varys in terms of seeing the big picture, and he's definitely cutthroat enough to get exactly what he wants. He knows what needs to be done, and he'll do anything to get it. So those are always very fun villains.
For sure. Do you think that he will outlive Ramsey?
It seems like I don't know. It's gonna be interesting to see where Ramsey goes, but it's no. I don't think so, man. I just imagine Ramsey sort of revolting, getting painted into a narrower and narrower corner, and then just flipping on the people. Maybe, going after the wife so that she can't have an heir, and then just going, full Tyrion, like putting a crossbore. One of those crossbores. They're the boards that do CrossFit. Have you seen them? They're introducing that this season. It's,
Alongside the shake weight.
yeah, it's like in order to bring it into the modern age and really appeal to the hipsters, they're bringing in crossbores.
Yeah. Well, their audience is certainly not big enough. They need to.
You got to do what you can.
Try to capture a wider demographic. Yeah, I mean, so you think that Ramsey will be the head of House Bolton at some point before all is said and done?
Yeah, probably briefly.
Yeah,
before he meets an untimely end.
Yeah.
It would be like in the same way that Martin and Game of Thrones will sort of give you that feeling of anyone can go at any time. It would be pretty interesting if like Ramsey somehow lived and was fine. They sort of flipped that on its head. It's like the guy that really deserves a gruesome, horrible death just doesn't shake out that way.
Ramsey's the last person standing in the whole show. Gets everything he wants.
That would that's one way to do it.
Yeah.
That's one way to distance yourself from the books.
Yeah, or not. I mean, who knows?
Right.
But yeah, Ramsey and the Knights King raising each other's hands over a pile of corpses. The final shot. Well, I would definitely say I wouldn't have seen that coming.
Yep.
I mean, except I just described it, so I guess I did kind of see it coming if it happens now. But all right, so I think that's probably enough for episode 1 here. Anyway, I'm sure we're going to keep talking about these episodes probably on a practically weekly basis. We may take a week off here or there, jump in with some of the other shows that are going on right now. Veep and Silicon Valley are both very good. We'll probably do those as a package. And we also, want to touch on a couple other shows
The
here.
last package HBO shows, though, we did ended up in one of them being canceled. So let's not try to get too excited about smacking Veep and Silicon Valley together. Although they seem like they're probably bulletproof at this point.
I think they're safe. Yeah. I think they both are doing well enough, both ratings and in critical adoration. Someone who is not adored by the critics.
Oh yeah.
Is
Hillary Clinton
or the voters for that matter.
Any politician.
I was gonna go Ted Cruz, but who got his ass handed to him in the primary yesterday. We're recording this on a Wednesday, of course. Tuesday was the sort of the last big quote unquote super primary of the season, where you had a bunch of states going at once, and Trump was dominant, but was also expected to be dominant. He was slightly more dominant than expected, but ultimately the numbers haven't changed. Everything is looking the same, and he's going to still going to be close as to whether he gets that 1237 number or not. And then on the other side, of course, Hillary also had a very good night, but that was also expected. So nothing has really changed there. Although the Sanders campaign did come out and say that they were going to think about what their next moves were going to be. And then they also announced today that they are going to be laying off several hundred of their campaign staffers. So certainly it seems like they're scaling back. Bernie's saying he's still going to be in it until California. But it's certainly a recognition, I think an open recognition on their part that they're not going to be getting the nomination at this point. And they realize that, and they're signaling that, so it's not about that anymore for the Sanders campaign. It's really about just continuing to try to put forth his agenda and make sure that it doesn't go by the wayside.
And probably in some way to make sure that all of the people who are huge diehard Sanders supporters, it's probably a good way to transition them towards Hillary Clinton. Whereas, like, if he had sort of pulled out right away, I imagine a lot of voters would have been left with a much more sour taste in their mouth. So this will allow, him to sort of pivot and keep those Democrats in line.
Yeah. So speaking of Sanders, and we will speak of Sanders in just a moment.
Yeah, we'll speak of Sanders in a moment, but first I gotta take a sip of this delicious watered down Coke Zero. Coke Zero, there's 0% chance you'll like it. Okay, so Sanders, you wanna beat this dead horse, huh, Kyle?
Well, no, what I want to talk about with Sanders is the idea of the revolution, right? The political revolution. That was what he kind of ran on, this idea of bringing other voters into the process and people who were not traditionally engaged, so on and so forth. And it seems that the revolution has failed, at least in that regard. Now, first off, do you think that, like, what do you think is the goal of the revolution? Do you feel like that was the goal, was to bring people into the process to build a new voting bloc that didn't exist before?
Yeah, I mean, Sanders himself, his camp at least, has said time and time again that if they can get more people to vote, then he has a better shot. That was something that he echoed quite a bit. And of course, voter turnout in this country is not exceptional. It is not mandatory, like in some place where we're huge, like Australia. So I think that sort of cut the legs out of the army from the very beginning.
Yeah. And the thing, obviously there were people who were not involved in the political process before who did come out to vote for him, but they were mostly young people who didn't necessarily have a chance to be involved before. So this was kind of their first guy, because there was no Democratic primary last time. Obviously, last 4 years ago, because Obama was the incumbent, and so and so for anybody who was, say, under like 26, they didn't really. This is really their first time to be engaged, and so those voters, he did capture, but not in any greater numbers than a lot of other people have come before. I think that's sort of what when they've looked at the numbers, basically, with his candidacy, he has what the demographics of who he's gotten to vote and the numbers that he's gotten to vote for him don't look that different from other sort of liberal challengers in the past, where they talk about Howard Dean over John Kerry or Bill Bradley over Al Gore. So recent history, other people who have filled that role have turned out similar numbers or similar slices of
it seems like there's
electorate.
always that segment of the population that is really very vocal about their love for a particular candidate. Ralph Nader is another example of someone who people really wanted to flock to his banner, but just not enough of them.
Right. So we're definitely not seeing a bunch of new first-time primary voters in the way that you would have needed to see to allow for this revolution to succeed. So the question is why? Why do you think that the revolution failed in that regard?
Oh, well, maybe it just never had a chance, Like, maybe it was all hype and sort of optimism with no practicality attached to it. I mean, people don't want what's best for them, man.
But Sanders himself that was asked about this last week, and he very pointedly said, like, well, poor people don't vote. But even that was sort of that's definitely true. Like, poor people certainly don't vote relative to to wealthier people as far as the on a per capita basis. That's definitely true. But it's it's interesting because even in his case, his support really hasn't come from the poor in large numbers. In fact, Hillary Clinton has done better among the poor overall, and his support has really come from, for the most part, more well-to-do, like liberals, better educated, a more successful liberal kind of rump of the party, and so is that really the reason? If more poor people voted, would that really have helped him? I think what he's really trying to get at is that if poor people voted in their
In their own
interests,
interests? Yeah, sure.
but that's a separate issue, right?
Is
So,
it?
well, I think, well, it definitely is. I mean, if you get more poor people to vote, but they still don't vote in their own interest, then how does that help someone like Bernie Sanders?
Right, but maybe it's exactly that. Maybe that's what he's saying is, poor people don't vote. But what he means is in their own interests, and that was a big part of the problem, is that people that he thought would come out in droves for him, or actually maybe they showed up, but they didn't trust an old Jew from Vermont.
It. Why do you think it is that there is just? So, are you saying potentially a candidate problem? Or are you saying then that a
Oh, I
different
think that that's probably always has something to do with it. Yeah,
right?
for sure. I think if he were a young, half black guy, then he probably would have done better than being like a super old white dude.
Yeah, I mean,
Especially with like, because he basically, no matter how hard he tried, he wasn't really doing well with black voters. I mean, Hillary Clinton was beating him fairly handily,
oh
time and time
yeah,
again.
yeah, more than fairly handily. Yeah, and he certainly got some high profile black celebrities to endorse him and stump for him. People like Spike Lee and Danny Glover, and I know there was even more the intelligentsia, Cornel West, people like that who stumped pretty hard for him, but it didn't seem to make a huge difference in terms of the overall. One group of black people he actually did very well with was young black people. That's the one group that he won over Hillary, which again just ties into the general youth vote that he was able to capture, and that shows that the black community, of course, is not monolithic in its voting, and they have uh, they break down along demographic lines just like everyone else. Um,
I think we also have to consider that people want to back a winner and they want to back an outsider. And since you have two outsiders running and one of them very clearly seems more poised to win, it's really remarkable the amount of people I've seen online that I've talked to in person who would vote for Sanders if they weren't voting for Trump. Like, it doesn't seem to make any sense that those would be your two switches, but that's how heavily invested people seem to be in like just the idea of doing something differently.
that's what I was about to ask you. I was going to say, are there really people out there that just are willing to go from Sanders to Trump just based on who's doing better?
Yeah, I think so.
That's that makes absolutely no sense
No,
to
it
me.
doesn't make any sense, man. But what do you want? It's people that are so hung up on the idea of just not having another legacy president, or they really like. I talked to a gentleman who really liked most of what Sanders had to say until he started talking about gun control and gun regulation, and then all of the other things went out the window. And he switched over, to the idea of Trump just based on that one issue. So, people get scared of the word socialism. People, when it came down to his plan for healthcare, and it turns out that it was going to cost people a little bit more in order to save money in the long run. A lot of people that said they were Sanders supporters, when they were polled, said like, no, wait, I don't want that. I don't actually want to shell out the money or make the sacrifice for long-term gains. So I think there are people that probably were, in love with the story and wanted to see something different and something new, but ultimately that craving of novelty, they were easily swayed over to the Trump side of things.
do you think that like what do you think it would take for a candidate to be able to capture or to turn out large numbers of poor voters, people who are not voting? I mean, it does seem like there's obviously there's some poor people who vote and just like all across the board, but the actual like the general demographics, the general percentages of the different types of people who vote don't change that much from election to election. Um, and so, what do you think? Like, what do you think? What candidate? What would the candidate look like who's actually able to really inspire, these poor people to come out in droves? Do you have anything in
I
your
mean,
head?
maybe Jesus. He would look like Jesus, maybe. Jesus or like Angelina Jolie or something. Like, honestly, I don't think until we institute a system where your vote is, you are legally bound to vote, I just don't imagine. It's kind of like being a rock star. And like in this day and age, like how many real rock stars are there left? It's just not something that we live in too big of a country with too many diverse opinions and too many people splitting hairs about specific issues that I just don't think that we are currently in an age where that sort of unification can really happen again anytime soon. Maybe after the real revolution happens, we'll see something. But after the armed revolution, no. But I just
I thought you were
again,
going to
it's
say Prince and the Revolution.
yeah,
Well, that's something
you
we can all
too.
get behind. I think, well, one of the other question then is, would it even be a good thing? I mean, you talked about mandatory voting and everyone being sort of forced to be involved in the process, but would that really be a good thing from the standpoint of voting is pretty easy? I mean, barring some of the bullshit that they have obviously started putting in place lately with voter ID, but that's relatively new. I mean, um, but and that still I think impacts like a relatively small number of people, potentially a crucial number in some swing states, but still, overall voting is a fairly easy thing to do, and people are just choose not to do it. And so if they can't even be bothered, um, like how much do we want to weigh their opinions in terms of the direction of the country, right? If they can't be bothered, if they're going to, they have so little interest, and they're going to presumably be investigating these issues with so little attention to detail. Are those opinions that we want taken into account?
Well, I don't know. That's a good question. I think that you're probably a lot closer to a Trump presidency, honestly, if you get people that are uninformed and uninterested and just going with like name recognition.
Right.
That could be certainly detrimental, but it might be the sort of thing where, at first it's an ugly sort of violent kind of process, is having all of these like buffoons suddenly evolve involved in the election, but perhaps as time goes on, it's something that shakes out as beneficial. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, my instinct is that though they're my instinct is not to weigh their opinions. Really, is to say that look, you have the opportunity to vote, you have the opportunity to investigate the issues and make your voice heard, and if you choose not to take advantage of that, then I just don't have a tremendous amount of uh, respect for your you know I don't know how to put this delicately. I'm going to say respect for.
You don't have to put it delicately, man. It's our podcast.
It's true, but I.
You can call those dickholes.
But you know what I mean. Like if things aren't if things aren't turning out the way you want them to, and you refuse to participate in the process, it's like, well, I mean, and I also feel like there is that level, and this is not to slide into elitism, but I do think that there's something about that. Like, I want intelligent people making decisions when it comes to public policy. Obviously, I want intelligent politicians. I want intelligent advisors to be involved with these politicians, and I want intelligent, informed voters driving that process. And so, I don't think bringing more like unintelligent people or uninterested people into it is going to help with those ends. And I do think that, yeah, like what you kind of see is when you get like the one person who has brought new people into the process this year and is not Bernie Sanders, but Donald Trump. And so, like, that's kind of the scary thing to look at is like, well, what kind of monster are you creating by bringing these people into the process?
Yeah, I think that probably it's systemic, and I think that a lot of people who aren't voting are very much like our good friend Chris Ayub, who just like says the game is rigged, and therefore like my vote doesn't matter. I think what you need to do is stress the importance of this sort of thing like early on. So many people that probably would make perfectly reasonable decisions if they feel like the deck is stacked against them, then they'll just say, it doesn't really affect me. It doesn't affect my day-to-day life. I'm busy. I'm doing this other thing. I got kids to feed. I got lawns to mow or whatever. And so I think that, yeah, it probably needs to be something that a conversation that we have with people to let them know they actually still have power. Just that feeling of, I mean, that's how you manufacture consent, right? You tell people that, or you, through sheer force of will and repetition, you show people that their actions don't really have an effect on the bigger picture as a whole, and that's sort of, I think, where we need to start. And then I think if people could find that they actually their vote is important and can make a difference, then I think you would find the electorate in general more well informed and more well invested. But it's getting over that initial hump. Like everybody just thinks that the whole thing's foobar. So, where do you go from there? I mean, I'm half inclined to feel that way myself a lot of the time.
Yeah, and I think that that's reasonable to some degree, to be frustrated with various aspects of the system. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but the idea of just, well, I'm going to throw in the towel, I mean, that's fine, I guess, if you want to do that, but you also have to recognize that that's something that you're choosing to give up, and if you're choosing not to have a voice in the process, however small that voice might be, then you're somewhat culpable in the degree to which it is FUBAR. So I think you.
Yeah, if you don't vote, you can't complain, right?
Yeah.
There's a reason that people say that.
Yeah, I mean that's I guess that's part of that's what it boils down to, right? I mean that's what that sentiment that they're
more or less. That's really
there.
the only reason I vote. Is because my guy always loses or whatever, and then I get to complain.
Right. You really just want to go straight to the complaining.
I would if I didn't have to vote in order to complain. I wouldn't.
Yeah, it's just a sort of a way station on the way to the complaint department. Yeah, I think. Well, the other part, of the revolution, as far as Sanders in particular, or the aspect of his candidacy that was somewhat revolutionary, was the amount of small dollar donations he was able to raise. The tremendous amount of money he was able to raise on the backs of small dollar donations. And do you think that is replicable by another candidate? Do you think that was something sort of unique to Sanders and his particular appeal, or do you think that we'll start seeing other candidates?
I think that'll definitely take on more of a. I mean, this election has taught you anything. It's that the Koch brothers can't buy every single election. They can't prop up a particular candidate just because super billionaires, think a guy is their guy. That doesn't mean that that they're infallible. So yeah, I think that moving forward, you'll definitely see more of this. Maybe not to the degree anytime soon of what Sanders has been able to achieve, but crowdsourcing has caught on in so many other aspects. I wouldn't be surprised if we could in a few years' time get a Kickstarter president.
Yeah, I do wonder a lot of Sanders' appeal and so much of the enthusiasm that has been created around his candidacy, how much that really has to do with social media and the technologies that are so prevalent now versus, like, for example, if Howard Dean was running in 2016 instead of 2004, do you think there would be a similar sort of wellspring around him? I think there probably would have
Yeah.
been, if not even more so.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because arguably, again, on paper, Sanders is not necessarily the most imposing candidate, and so the fact that he was able to generate the excitement he was able to generate, and I think the reach, like that was one of the reasons I think where the money came from, basically, is the bottom line. Is I think it was just so much harder to raise money, small dollar donations, prior to the existence of the internet. So I really do feel like it's a more technological phenomenon than it is a candidate phenomenon. And so I think you're right. I think we're going to see that be replicated by other people going forward.
Yeah, I mean, failure of revolution or not, this guy still went a lot further than a lot of people said he was going to. I mean, you would be stupid not to take some pages from his book.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, and politics is nothing if not a copycat game.
Yeah.
So I'm sure we will see lessons from both sides. People taking pages from both.
Yeah, it's just going to be reality TV stars running
Yeah.
in the next few cycles, I think.
Well, okay.
Step 1, Jeff Probst for president.
Oh, you picked him as the reality TV star. You went with a host, huh?
Yeah, well, hey, man, he's charming, and I've sat through enough eliminations and episodes of Survivor to know he's got a good head on his
With
shoulders.
some gravitas. See, I thought I was going to go like the Kim Kardashian route or something, but obviously you're still thinking
She's vice president.
You're thinking that's
Probst, Kardashian.
That's maybe like 2028 or something.
Yeah.
We're not that far down the slope to Gomorrah yet. We're gonna start with Probst and work our way down to the Kardashian level. Makes sense. Well, all right. I think we can put that to bed as far as
like an old Jew right after an episode of Matlock. Let's just put it to bed, man. Nappy nap time, Bernie.
Yeah. Well, he's gonna hang in till California, and he will, like I said, hopefully, as you said, he will make a transition now, and figure out a way to sort of gracefully still support the candidate who ultimately shares his views, in large part, and sort of unify the party behind her.
Have you given any thought to, just a quick sidestep here, to Clinton moving forward? Have you given any thought or heard anything? What's your personal theory on who she chooses as a running mate? Are their names being bandied about at this point?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But I mean, far from just like speculative. Like, is she have a short list or something resembling a medium list, perhaps?
I mean, I don't know how inside the information is at this point. There's definitely lists that are being reported. Whether they're being reported as this is insider knowledge of her camp, I don't know. But yeah, I mean, obviously the one, there's been a couple of names like Julian Castro, who's the HUD secretary, and Tom Perez, who's the labor secretary, who've been
Just
talking about
leaning hard into that Latino vote.
Right. Yeah, that's definitely the idea of, well, maybe we have a young Latino male that's very much like a balance the ticket idea. Another, other people have been talked about are some just sort of moderate male politicians from key states like Tim Kaine. And then there has been talk of the all-woman ticket with Elizabeth Warren. And
do you think that would be a wise move?
I don't know if it would be wise or not in terms of capturing the most votes, but here's sort of a lot of the analysis of the process kind of says that the Veep pick really doesn't matter that much at all, in terms of capturing votes. Like, people vote for the person at the top of the ticket. So unless you bring in a Veep who is so idiotic or scandalous or whatever that they're damaging.
Somebody like Palin-esque.
Exactly. Like, Palin is sort of the gold standard for that, or the tin standard, or whatever you want to say. But unless you do something like that, it doesn't really matter. Unless you're bringing someone who's reasonable. So a wise politician, a wise presidential candidate will bring in somebody who's going to help them once they get in office. And so, would Elizabeth Warren be a helpful person when Hillary gets in office? I think she definitely could be. I could see her. She seems obviously she's an incredibly smart woman, someone who could be given, definitely head up projects and things of that nature. A lot of the way, Obama has trusted Biden to, carry a lot of projects and lead the way on some things. And so I think that's what you really want to look at if you're picking a vice president, is somebody who's going to be able to be a partner in the process of governing, rather than just somebody who might theoretically wrangle a couple more votes from some demographic group or some key state, because that stuff just hasn't really held up historically when you look at the numbers. So I don't know. It would be fun. It would be fun to have Elizabeth Warren on the ticket, I think. I mean, she certainly would win over, I think, all the Sanders supporters who are thinking, if they're thinking about deserting Hillary, and, just really would give you a stark contrast, obviously, going across from the orange-faced misogynist, with two women.
He's been acting very presidential of late. So
yeah, by what standards exactly?
By his own. He told me.
Okay.
He said he could be presidential, and so I assume that's what he's doing.
All right. Well, it's all done then. I don't think we need to talk anymore. If he's going to be presidential, then we all look forward to President Trump in
Trump.
a few short months.
He's rewriting "Hail to the Chief" with just all Trumps. By the way, I don't know if you heard about that.
He does like to put his name on stuff. So, well, we'll see. He may have a tough time winning the presidency, especially if he can't win states like Arizona.
Yeah.
And if he can't raise enough votes in Arizona, then
come on, bring it home.
You might say he's not raising Arizona.
Yeah. Oh.
That didn't really work.
I thought you were going to say, then it's not Coen well for him.
See, that's much better. Why didn't you finish it for me?
Oh, well. I just wanted to give you your space, man. I don't want to suffocate you.
Yeah, well, next time, just really put my head underwater and just stop seeing bubbles. So
here we are, back at it again.
Director series, Raising Arizona, the Coen brothers. This is their second film. I don't know if Chris Ayub saw it, but if he did, I hope that he liked it better than Blood Simple. But yeah, this is my first time with Raising Arizona, and I know that's kind of embarrassing because it's been out since 1987, and I certainly have been a fan of the Coen brothers. I think I'd mentioned in an earlier podcast that I really have tried to watch it like 50 times, and somehow I just never quite get the job done. But I did get it done this week. Yeah. And I enjoyed it very much. Obviously, it's hard not to enjoy the film. Just a lot of energy, a lot of very much, sort of a screwball comedy, but, in times veers probably too far into the absurd for my taste, but there's so much fun dialogue and such great moments, and the way they're able to punctuate so much of the humor with the camera and the editing and everything does again show you how much it, making a good comedy movie is not just about writing the jokes. It's about the whole process of filmmaking, using all the tools at your disposal, from the way you're able to move the camera, from the way you're able to edit the cuts, the transitions. All those things play into making a truly good comedy. You can have good jokes and you can have good performances, but you need the whole package. And this movie definitely ascends to that level.
Yeah, the editing is also very important because sometimes it's just a cutaway to the right face. The editing and the casting, all those little things that go into making a comedy. Like Raising Arizona definitely has them all. I think of this movie and I just think, I love it so much. Holly Hunter, who, I'm paraphrasing, is so fantastic in this flick. That's one of the first things, like right off the bat, that you notice. As I was watching it again this time, I was trying to think of an actress that really put so much like hardcore drama into such a ridiculous role. I mean, she says funny things, they do funny things. She's sort of a ridiculous character, but she plays it almost super straight. She's like tears up at multiple points in this movie, and it's not joke crying. Like, she's really going for it.
Right.
It's super impressive.
Yeah, yeah, I think that was the key to her performance. Well, you just nailed it right there by saying that she plays it straight. You know, she plays this woman who really is devastated at being barren and not being able to have a child, and and that's what makes it work. I mean, obviously, it's over the top, and some of the things they have her do and say are ridiculous. But yeah, but she doesn't wink at the camera, for sure. And really, you know, I don't know. I would say that's probably true of Nicolas Cage as well. Not to the maybe to the same degree, but he, you know, this is a very good performance by him, and a reminder that Nicolas Cage was once upon a time, and actually I think still is a good actor. He just doesn't do a lot of good movies,
Yeah.
which is unfortunate.
He's a very precise tool. I mean, you have to use him in the right way. But, you know, sort of like a Mark Wahlberg type of situation. Like, when he is properly applied, it's just dynamite.
Yeah, I don't know. I think Cage is definitely has more. To me, he has more range than Wahlberg, and he can do more things. But I think a lot of it for Cage is I don't know how much of it is about applying the tool properly as much as it is getting him invested in the role. Like, I think that he does a lot of these movies. I get the impression, anyway, that he does a lot of these movies just for a paycheck. I mean, he certainly has had sort of famously bad financial
Yeah.
management.
It's like $750,000 on like a elephant skull.
Right. So you know, he's definitely needs the cash sometimes, and it seems
Impulse buyer, impulse actor.
yeah. I guess maybe it's hard to have one without the other, but anyway, so it does seem like he does a lot of these movies just for a fast buck, and if that's the case, then it doesn't. You know, I don't think he really even tries, and I don't know why. I guess people are just happy to have the Nicolas Cage name and face in their film with some of these things, but yeah, it does seem like you really want to sit down and talk to him and make sure that he really likes the script and that he's into this character and wants to commit, you know, before you sign him up and pay him the bucks. One of the funnier lines I read was there was the Left Behind, or no, the Left Behind,
Yeah.
Left Behind series of books, of course, are these
It's
Christian.
like garbage with a cover.
Yeah, I've yet to have the pleasure of reading them myself, but you know,
Just read a Chipotle bag instead, man.
basically they're apocalyptic, you know, books written by these Christian authors, sort of roughly based on the Book of Revelations and whatnot, and this idea of the rapture coming is what I've gathered from the Chipotle bag, but. Anyway,
That Chipotle bag's name was Kirk Cameron.
yeah, well, they actually made a version with Kirk Cameron a while ago, and then they decided to remake it with Nicolas Cage because, you know,
Because people are still afraid of the end of the world.
I guess so, because there are still Christians who are willing to part with their money.
They want to be validated in their beliefs so much that they're just have a boner for the apocalypse. Like, see, guys,
Told ya.
look at this boner. You know how Christians talk.
But anyway, so Nicolas Cage does this version, and it costs $20 million, and the review I was reading said, based on the production value that's on the screen, they're pretty sure that Nicolas Cage got a salary of $19,999,000. So,
Yeah, nice work if you can get it.
so yeah, and I'm guessing that's one of the roles that he was not fully invested in. But I don't know. I haven't seen it, so I guess I shouldn't judge. So next week we'll be watching Left Behind
All
with
right.
Nicolas Cage. We'll pivoting to a Nicolas Cage series. No, but anyway, back to this film and Nicolas Cage. Yeah, again, a reminder that, you know, when he does get into it, and when he is used properly, as you say, definitely a very effective actor, very funny in this movie. I did kind of it was reminiscent with his accent of his Con Air performance. So I was kind of, and he's even in jail and everything. So I was kind of hoping that maybe we could do some kind of crossover where it turns out that HI is really Cameron Poe or something. But anyway, it didn't go in that direction.
Well, yeah, you're right. No, it doesn't work.
So
great physical look of Cage. Another one of those just nice touches, like his hair sort of reacting to scenes, going wild. This movie is full of so many little flourishes like that. And as you said, it really pays attention to the whole picture. And sort of, the Coen brothers are generally known. It's well known that they are very meticulous about the way things are done. They're not the kind of directors that are going to, have some sort of Anchorman style setup where an actor will just throw out an improv line or maybe say, perhaps I'll take the character this way. Like the Coen brothers ain't having any of that shit. They know exactly what they want. They're super meticulous, and it does end up paying off in a film like this, or even like Blood Simple, where it's very clear that they have a super direct vision.
Although they were apparently not meticulous about researching Arizona accents.
Not even close.
Have they ever been to Arizona?
I mean, they shot it here, so you'd think. Yeah, it does seem to be almost in the same way. I did feel that way watching this flick, is sort of like how I felt that Blood Simple to a degree was an indictment of like Texas and like this sort of what do they hate about the Southwest and just like the West Coast in general, as we'll move on to Big Lebowski and probably see at some point. But it's like, do they think everyone down here is just a gun-toting hick? Like it's the most
with all this
accurate representation of fucking Arizona you've ever seen, where it's like every clerk has a gun and the cops like hanging out of the cop car shooting. Yeah, and then
everyone has the Southern twang.
Weird, yeah.
It was very sort of strange. I don't know if this Arizona for them is just some kind of mystical land that they felt free to imprint whatever they wanted on, because
I love the joke about them moving to suburban Tempe.
Right.
And it's just like one trailer and like a couple of other buildings and just vast sprawling desert.
Yeah. Although in 87, who knows? Maybe that was.
I'm sure it was.
Suburban Tempe. This is also this is the first collaboration we see between the Coen brothers and John Goodman, who, of course, becomes a staple and
a much appreciated staple.
Yeah, and really is plays a very similar type in most of these films. He's always this guy who works off this contrast of being very eloquent and yet this incredibly rough and tumble at the same time. And Goodman is masterful at that. And this really obviously just starts that process off on the right foot here. It was probably my favorite character in the film. And stole most of the scenes he was in, which he has a tendency to do in these movies, in these Coen brother movies.
He's good. It's interesting to see William Forsythe in that sort of dopey role as the younger John Goodman's younger brother, because when was the last time you saw William Forsythe as anything other than like a police detective or like a police chief or like an army general or like, you know what I mean? He's always playing that same character. So to see him being like this no-brain moron without a mustache was it was pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely. Did you find yourself at all confused by the actions of Hi or HI, who's Nicolas Cage's character, when he first broke into the nursery to steal the baby? Like, what the fuck was he doing? Like,
that's a good question, man.
Like, I never quite got what was going on there.
He's just sort of picking up babies and putting them down, but not, if there was some sort of unease or feeling of, worry that maybe he was struggling with it morally, that doesn't come across at all. It just seems like a man who's never seen a baby before in his life. He was just like picking them up and putting them down, and that was a definitely not a master criminal at work.
Yeah. Well, and that had already been pretty well established by his by the opening sequence and his various failed robberies. But yeah, but it did feel almost like he had no idea what he was even trying to do. Like I was going, is he trying to steal one? Is he just checking it out to see like which one they might want to steal when they come back? Is he casing it? Like is he like when they're crawling away and he's picking some up or trying to get them to stop crying? Like why do you care if they cry? Like why don't you just take one and go?
Take one and go, for sure.
It just didn't make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, it seems like that scene would have made sense if you thought that he was having reservations about taking the baby, but it didn't play out that way at all.
And maybe
Agree.
maybe that was the goal. That was the one scene that I would say didn't work for me. I mean, it still has some funny moments, but it just bothered me because I couldn't understand his motivation. So I will not be picking that as my favorite scene. The they had that chase scene that you sort of referred to earlier with the cop hanging at the side of the vehicle and blasting away. I mean, my first question is, how many bullets does that cop have in that gun? I think he's
probably got like 6 guns. He's just picking up one after the other.
Is he being fed by a belt? Like, I swear he must take at least like 400 shots in that scene. It's a revolver from what I can tell. I mean, I think it's like 6 shots.
Yeah, this is sort of what you said something before about how some of it sort of takes a turn into the surreal.
Right.
Maybe if it's too much for your liking. And that's something that I found myself noticing this go around viewing Raising Arizona, is that something that Coen seemed to do, if my memory serves me correctly, is almost set a story in the real world, but then make it very obvious that this doesn't take place in the real world, with Arizona being, just the setting of Arizona in general is just like a cactus, and it was actually shot here. I mean, they could have made it look like Arizona, but it almost looks like Arizona on a postcard, and then like nothing like Arizona. So everything that they seem to be doing in this movie,
it's definitely a caricature of Arizona.
Is a caricature of people and of place and of just the way that the world goes. And it's really interesting that it's in that space, because I think that it insulates the movie from a certain amount of criticism. So that's pretty clever on their part, because definitely there are plenty of things that happen in this movie that don't make any like physical sense, if nothing else. Like the running out of bullets is one thing. The sort of the shots that some people take, and that's like any fight scene in a movie is generally unrealistic, but this definitely takes it to, it's like, how did the baby fall off of the roof of the car and then just land perfectly? That baby was fine, man. That shit is, doesn't make any sense, but there we go.
Do you think that that's the part of it was them satirizing action films and how ridiculous the scenes are?
It's maybe possible. It never occurred. I mean, I don't look at it that way, but I could, if they said that that's what we're doing, then I'd be like, all right.
Yeah. I mean, even with the, the character of the biker, I'm blanking on his name now, but
yeah, I just remember him as it's from Of Mice and Men, Lenny Smalls.
Yeah, but how he's, when they're showing the perspective of his bike, he's like jumping over cars and things like in ways that make no sense. There's not even a ramp there. Like somehow he just goes up the back of a car and in this point of view shot. So it's that same kind of idea. I thought maybe they're just playing with how ridiculous
the cartoonishness of it all.
Yeah, of chase scenes or of action scenes and fight scenes and things like that, and they're just saying, well, fuck it, we're going to steer all the way into this and take it to the nth degree. And again, there was definitely a lot of humor to be found in that, so I can.
Yeah, I love the introduction of the biker where, the lizard is there one moment and then it's shot off, and then he drives by the flower and it bursts into flames. Some great sight gags.
Yeah. Well, do you have a favorite scene here?
I think my favorite scene in this movie, there's a lot of good ones. The chase that we referenced earlier was very good in showing the sort of escalation, and then there's that great panty line and sort of the madcap farcical nature of the whole thing is great. But for me, the scene that best encapsulates the spirit of the movie is when John Goodman's character finds out, and John Goodman and his brother, they find out that the baby is actually not who H.I. had initially told them. They decide they're going to take the baby, and H.I. goes to fight John Goodman and stop them. That whole fight scene inside, a ridiculous fight scene to be sure, but then coupled with the fact that it's inside this very tiny trailer, and the trailer itself, the environment, is hindering the fight. So you see H.I. go up for like a double axe handle, and he scrapes his knuckles on a popcorn ceiling, and then yowls in agony. That whole fight scene worked really well, and it's just nice to see the Coen brothers with another character putting someone through a wall, just creating a door where there was once a wall. You know, they're sticking with that theme that they established in Blood Simple. So that's my favorite scene.
And it's great how the wall is like, you know, a tenth of an inch thick.
Yeah.
So basically a paper wall that it goes through. But my favorite part of that scene though was the very end, the capper, when Cage is practically unconscious and they've taken the baby and he's just laying there, and then the door opens back up and they just show you the feet, and they go and they pick up the book, the How to Raise a Baby basically book, which is the same book that they had stolen earlier in the film from
which eventually gets returned in what much worse condition. The baby is fine. The book gets fucked up.
Yeah, they treated the baby a lot better than the book, which I think is good. That might have been a bridge too far if they had somehow gotten the baby harmed in this film. I think that was a wise choice by the Coens to leave the baby unscathed. Though it was a touch and go there for a moment when he was riding on the front of the motorcycle. But my favorite scene also involves John Goodman, and it's the bungled bank robbery.
Yes.
Which is there's something about a bank robbery going awry that it's always a good time, and this one was definitely highlighted. I think so much of the humor in the film, and this crossing absurdity with sort of sharp dialogue, and this idea how they tell everybody to freeze and then get on the ground, and nobody does anything, and then this is like, well, what do you want, sir? Do you want? Should we freeze or should we get on the ground? Because if we get on the ground, we will certainly be in motion. Well, that's a good point. All right, just forget about the freezing thing. Just get on,
until you get on the ground, then freeze.
Yeah,
and the tellers disappear.
Yeah, where'd the tellers go? Yeah, it just sort of keeps building off that, and then like the Coens, they always go all the way through the scene, right? Like they don't rest on their laurels. They have a strong start with those gags, and a lot of scenes I think in comedies kind of peter out at that point. But they take it all the way through to them driving away and realizing they forgot the baby again. Yeah. And then it's like 5 straight minutes of them screaming in the car at each other, which is great. And it actually leads right into my favorite line, so I'll just jump right in with that.
Sure.
Which is when they're on the way back to recapture the baby for the second time, and they get basically run off the road by Nicolas Cage and Holly Hunter, and they rip open the doors, they put a gun in their face, and John Goodman's line is, "God damn it, H.I., ain't we got enough to contend with?"
Yeah, they really did. Yeah, that's a great. One of the lines I wrote down was from that bank robbery scene because it's done so well. It's when he says the name, Evil says, Gail's name, and then Gail's like, "Don't use my real name," and he says, he's like, "Not even your code name?" And he goes, "Y'all hear that? We're using code names." I just, It's like. Criminal masterminds, man. There's so many good lines. I wrote down a couple here. That's one of the things that it's not actually a line, but that I noticed watching this time through is that when the store is being held up and the clerk, it goes up back to the shot of the clerk when H.I. before he runs through the grocery store. He gets that initial robbery. The clerk is seen asleep with a Jugs magazine.
Right.
And on the Jugs, it's just a picture of one woman, but it says, "Tits times 2." And I'm just like, That's how they come.
Yeah.
Leave it to the Coens to even do something goofy with that. So
Yeah. Yeah, and there are little Easter eggs like that. There's the little sign, which is the only signage on the entire vehicle of uh, HI's boss, which says like "Caution, I drive naked," which is
mhm.
sort of like just apropos of nothing. And again, there's not like you could see it one where there's a bunch of signs plastered. It's kind of a baby on board type scene, but yeah. Anyway, it makes no sense. It's just kind of a funny gag to throw in the background. Yeah, my was that your favorite line, or did you
That
have?
was probably, yeah. The Codenames one was great. I also enjoy "You ate sand." That's when the when he's responding to the old man talking about when they ran out of crawdads, they ate sand. Just that reaction from Cage is great. And I think one of the most clever lines is when Ed is telling HI not to cuss in front of the baby, and HI responds, "You don't know a cuss word from Shinola," which is it's
Yeah,
just like that's something that you could easily miss, I think.
yeah, yeah. There, it's definitely one you want to watch again just to try to catch all the dialogue. My honorable mention for a line here comes from by way of Nathan, Arizona, in one of his first scenes here, where he's talking on the phone to somebody about buying some furniture, which of course he sells at Unpainted Arizona, and they're wanting to buy a table without chairs. He says, "Chairs, you got a dinette set. No chairs, you got dick."
Yeah, yeah, that's great. It's another character we didn't even touch upon, but it was
Right.
very, very well played.
Yeah. I like a guy being so passionate about a dinette set. You want to make sure they're getting the full dinette set. You don't want them ended up with dick.
Yeah.
So yeah, so very very enjoyable. As definitely
Now, do you just watch it the one time?
I did.
Yeah.
And just watched the one. So but yeah, definitely I think also showed how the Coen brothers are very adept at moving between darker material like what we saw in Blood Simple, which while it certainly had a few comedic moments, was overall
Yeah.
definitely a darker drama into something that is very sort of light and wacky like this. And
And still involves like a man being blown up
right,
by a grenade, and a man seeing that death coming, like
uh,
all of the horror that should be involved. That when it happens, it's just fucking awesome.
yeah, and kidnapping a baby, and,
Yeah.
yeah. So and going to prison, yeah. So it's definitely they're able to make light of situations that don't inherently scream humor to you, but that's certainly one of their talents is working in some of those darker spaces. But it's interesting to see them make two very different movies, with the darker spaces. Like, it almost makes you feel like they could remake Raising Arizona as a drama, and they could remake Blood Simple as a comedy, and would probably work,
Yeah.
in both instances.
Ryan Gosling for HI. He's got that strong mustache game, bro.
Yeah, yeah, that's key. You gotta have that. I don't know. Do you think his hair can do those things?
No, I'm sure with CGI,
Yeah.
modern technology.
Let's get some CGI up in this bitch.
So, what do we do next week?
Next
On the
week,
agenda for movies.
Miller's Crossing.
Miller's Crossing.
Yeah, which back to the drama. So that will be good to see.
I love to see young filmmakers doing stuff with a purpose like this, and then doing work that obviously they're not young filmmakers anymore, but at the time, and then doing work that seems to purposely be them, stretching out their limbs as far as they can go, and saying like, I made this kind of movie, now let's make this kind of movie. The sort of that joy of rediscovering Anderson, and I think as we go on, we'll see that with the Coen brothers as well.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely fun to watch the movies in this order and recognize the body of work as a whole or as a piece, because that's not something you necessarily are as aware of when you're seeing movies spread out over the course of years, as we typically do. So That's definitely one of the benefits of this director series.
Yeah, and sometimes it's just nice to see an older movie like this and look back through the lens of time and see how you react to it now. And I've decided to carry that on with my album recommendation this week. Although, to be fair, Kyle, since I will be teaching you about modern music, I should say that this was something that initially came to me because, as we stated before, Silicon Valley is back, and I realized after. Have you seen the most recent episode?
I have not.
Okay, so not any kind of spoiler here, but at the end, a certain song played, and I was like thinking, man, Silicon Valley always has like great ending songs to
Was
their
it
shows.
playing over Richard's funeral?
Did my face give it away? I got that. I got that. Cersei Lannister small acting. Even when I tried not to spoil it, you could read it all right here in this old puss. So at the end of Silicon Valley, heard a song. I thought to myself, that kind of sounds like DJ Shadow, and it also kind of sounds like Run the Jewels, who I know that Silicon Valley had used before. So I looked it up. The song is called, and my recommendation for song this week is a great one. It's called "Nobody Speak," and it is by DJ Shadow featuring Run the Jewels. So my intuitions were spot on.
Nicely done. No one needs to teach you about modern music.
And I could be making all of that up, though, is the problem. But I was able to find it fairly quickly. It is something that's, good to see Run the Jewels cranking out some new material, especially with their, political takes that they do not shy away from. There is a line that says, "Flame your whole crew faster than Trump fucks his youngest," which is just great. Right, that's the kind of sense of humor they have. But it did make me want to go back, to circle back around here, to DJ Shadow, who I hadn't heard of for a while. So that's my album recommendation is actually DJ Shadow's very first record. Now, I'm not a big fan of electronic dance music or
DJs or shadows.
I'm really scared of my own shadow, man. If that Peter Pan thing happened to me, I would just be like, "Fuck it, it's over there now. Go on through life without a shadow." But this is an album. The album is called Introducing, and it is sort of a watershed moment in trip hop specifically, but also just sort of the fusing of hip hop and electronica in general. It's well regarded as one of the best, however many albums of the last 20 years. It came out 20 years ago in 1996, and so I decided to go back and give it a listen because it had been a while. And it's amazing how well it holds up. And I was also thinking it seemed appropriate given that recently, I gave you John Congleton, which is very dense and demands a lot of attention. And then I sort of gave you Cloud Cult. And how did you enjoy Cloud Cult, by the way?
Damn well I didn't listen.
Didn't listen to it. So,
but not for lack of desire.
No,
so,
just for pure forgetfulness.
Yeah, mostly that and busyness. But I will listen to Cloud Cult, and I will listen to DJ Shadow.
Introducing.
I'm going to listen to nothing but music for the next week, so I will have nothing else to talk about on our next podcast.
That's good. It's all we need. It is the sort of thing that, you said that primarily you are listening to music sort of in the background as you're getting other things done. And this is really a perfect album for that sort of thing, mostly because there are no real lyrics on it. There are some vocal samples. There are a couple of, repeated lines here and there, but it's generally an instrumental album. It has a great sort of mixture of funk and hip-hop beats. And one thing to know about DJ Shadow, sort of the big deal with him as a musician, is he was one of the first on the scene that was exclusively using samples. This is a guy who would go to the record store when he was making this album, spend hours in the record store every day buying old vinyls, and then finding parts of different songs, and he ended up constructing an album with Introducing that is almost 100% samples. Everything is taken from something else, and he layers them in such a way and recuts them in such a way that it has a great specific feel to it. It does not feel 20 years old, and hopefully you enjoy it, check it out, but definitely see where he started with introducing and see what he's doing now with the track Nobody Speak.
All right. Very good. I will probably check it out. I don't want to make any promises because, my
Yeah.
word is my bond, so can't have any bondage up in here. Um,
What? I was promised bondage.
all right, just this once, though.
Yes.
Well, I'm not going to give you bondage, actually, but I will give you a reminder that books are still a thing.
Oh. I was like spending so much time thinking about bondage since you brought up bondage that I totally spaced that books were still a thing.
Yeah, I feel like you're disappointed at the direction this is taking, but we're going to take it, and I'm going to recommend this week a book called How We Got to Now: 6 Innovations That Made the Modern World by Stephen Johnson.
Is this a Netflix show?
It may be a Netflix show.
It sounds very familiar, but I know I haven't read it.
You may have seen it, but you haven't read
Possible.
it. Anyway, the book
Is
basically...
one of the inventions bondage?
yeah, that's actually... it all ties
I like it
back
already.
in. Yeah, so it's all... 6 modern sex techniques which change the world.
Let's not lie to people, Kyle. We all know there's only 3 sex techniques, right? Right? There's
yeah.
doing it and doing it and doing it.
Oh, very well. There you go. We're past the music, Steve.
Sorry.
We're going on to books, and yeah. So How We Got to Now is a really interesting book that explores these really simplistic kind of what seem like essentially basic staple things that we just take for granted in our lives. Like the chapters. These are the chapter headings are. Like, for example, the cold, sound, clean, time, and light, and glass. So these are things you almost don't even think of as technologies in some ways. But what the book does is it really goes back to the very beginning of time on these things and shows you how there's a whole series of pieces that make such a thing possible, and things that we take for granted. The idea that we have climate controlled houses, and like we live in the desert, like people in Arizona, for example, whether it's the Coen brothers Arizona or the real Arizona where we live, we're living in a desert and it doesn't even feel like it because
Yeah, an intellectual desert.
but it's like getting to a place where we can
Because there's a bunch of dummies here.
that
Dummy
too.
land.
Well, that maybe that is like the Coen brothers. Then maybe they got it right. But like obviously the ability for us to be here, to be living here, to have those things and stuff, like it's a much longer story and unappreciated and sometimes. So this book really does help you appreciate the complexity of the modern world and how much it relies on these piecemeal innovations that have taken place over a long amount of time. So no real surprise that it would appeal to me, since one of my pet peeves is pointing out the complexity that is overlooked by people in all sorts of walks of life. But anyway, there's a little passage here I'll read, which I feel like highlights the main idea of the book pretty distinctly here. The next time you glance down at your phone to check what time it is or where you are, the way you might have glanced at a watch or a map just 2 decades ago, think about the immense layered network of human ingenuity that has been put in place to make that gesture possible. Embedded in your ability to tell the time is the understanding of how electrons circulate within Cesium atoms, the knowledge of how to send microwave signals from satellites, and how to measure the exact speed with which they travel, the ability to position satellites in reliable orbits above the Earth, and of course the actual rocket science needed to get them off the ground, the ability to trigger steady vibrations in a block of silicon dioxide, not to mention all the advances in computation and microelectronics and network science necessary to process and represent that information on your phone. You don't need to know any of these things to tell the time now, but that's the way progress works. The more we build up these vast repositories of scientific and technological understanding, the more we conceal them. Your mind is silently assisted by all that knowledge each time you check your phone to see what time it is, but the knowledge itself is hidden from view. That is a great convenience, of course, but it can obscure just how far we've come since Galileo's altar lamp daydreams in the Duomo of Pisa.
That's solid, man. This actually reminds me, just the idea of the book sounds very much like one of my favorite books by a guy named Bill Bryson. The book is called At Home, and he goes through the history of all of the sort of modern, he goes room by room, kitchen, bathroom, bedroom, and then explains, how we got to those points. Like, why do they call it a bedroom? Why are salt and pepper the two most used, seasonings?
When he gets to the bedroom, does he explain the origin of bondage then?
Yeah, he does. Comes from James Bond.
I knew you were going to get back to it. You won't let it go, Steve.
I can't let it go. I'm sort of bound by it.
I was hoping you would take the bait there. So yeah, there you go. You got two for one this time. You can check out How We Got to Now by Steven Johnson, or you can check out Bill Bryson's At Home. So there you go.
But I'm definitely interested in checking this book out, man. It's all those little things, all of the layers that you speak of that we don't appreciate on a daily basis is always something that's fascinating to me. Everything around you has such a rich history. And, people write, theses about what would be considered the most mundane things. You could do, like, doctoral theses on anything.
Maybe someday someone will do one on the Pod Couple.
Oh, yeah. Some poor schlub ran out of stuff. It'll be the last one anyone ever did. Everything else was taken.
Yeah. It's like, really, there's nothing else? The Pod Couple is seriously, that's the only thing left?
That's it.
Sorry, buddy. I don't know what to tell you. You can not get your doctorate if you... He's like,
Well, bricklaying actually is pretty noble work.
Yeah. Well, somebody will break down eventually and decide they still want that last doctorate. So until then, we've been the Pod Couple.
Signing off, Kyle Gherkin.
Stephen Hubbs, except, the other people.
Vice versa.
Indeed. All right. See you next week.